Time for JK. JK, morning, Jono.
How's it?
Yeah, fine, and you?
Yeah, world class, eh? As usual.
Okay, Jono, quite an interesting weekend of rugby. I said, and I say hindsight is the greatest science, but about a month ago I said, beware the Crusaders. What do you
Yeah,
say?
yeah, Blades. I did it as much as 3 or 4 months ago. So the thing with the Crusaders is that they've got a structure in place and their game plan, um, obviously suits this competition, and they've got game breakers. And you just see when they bring back their key players, they've developed so many others along the way that those players just seamlessly slot in. They are dangerous. I wouldn't, it wouldn't shock me for them to get through to the final. I do think that the Sharks will give them a good run again, though. I think Jake has once again, after this weekend, proved that he's a master planner. He really the game plan at Newlands was typical of him and the type of game that he likes to play. And it was the only game that I actually got wrong on the weekend. Not that it took rocket science to work out the rest, but I thought the Stormers won a role and that they do have some quality players in their ranks.
I did as well.
Yeah, and they were in the game, but they were in the game. Um, I just felt the Sharks were always more willing and knew exactly what they needed to do to win the game. And I think at the end of the day, there was a bit of naivety on the Stormers, a little bit in terms of the captaincy, leadership on the field, and also in terms of game plan. And I think that could be, if that can be developed more, there's no reason why they can't challenge the top six next year.
Yeah, right. Um, Funnily enough, I got that one wrong as well. I was on that 900th Boots and All show, and predicted that I thought the Stormers, with Skalkberger in the van, could well take the Sharks. Anyway, that was the one I got wrong. Well done to the Sharks for getting through, and good luck to them. Now,
Yeah,
quite obviously, you're assuming that the Sharks are going to beat the Highlanders.
yeah, and Blades, you see, that's another thing because if you look at the first game this year, they played in Durban and the Highlanders shocked them and really sort of trounced them. It
That's
was one
right.
of those days where the Sharks didn't get their game together, and I think the final score was something like 32-8.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I wouldn't underestimate the Highlanders. They've got game. Um, it's obviously just how the Sharks decide to dismantle them that'll be the key for that playoff game.
I've got a tweet here from Duncan Betteridge, who says to you, I saw your tweet on Saturday about the try of Stormers. What is your take and how far do you think the Sharks will go?
Okay, so the first question relates.
Yeah.
Look, I had a few of these listed down here, but we'll start with that one. Doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Okay.
Um, yeah, look, I think in general, what I've noticed in the last couple of weeks is that the rhetoric and opinions of players and captains and leaders on the field, they're ramping it up. Obviously, it's the business end of the competition. They're pretty eager to get the W behind the name, and Blades, I think there's too much of it. I don't think the referees are firm enough. What I find generally is that there's a bit of presence lacking on the part of the refs, and I think sometimes a little bit of direction as well. I think they can actually clamp down a little bit harder on the verbals, and like I said, I think there's too much of it. And so when you've got players like Israel Dag, Andy Ellis, holding the ref on their shoulder, flapping their arms up and down, Kieran Reid, running around to wherever the ref is to, make his point and then do it quite vociferously, in the Highlanders game and for me the week before against the Blues as well. I think there's too much of that, and I think the net effect of what it does is it throws the referee off his game if he's not able to have a strong presence on the field and crush that in its tracks. I think the same thing happened with the Sharks and the Stormers. I think Bismarck and the like were very vocal. I think it did throw Jaco Paper off a little bit. I found him a little bit more rushed than he normally is. That said, I don't for one second think that he had a bad game at all. But I just think that it threw him off, and then a couple of decisions looked dodgy, and a couple of non-decisions also that were questionable. So, Blaze, just to go back to the exact question. So, was the Stormers try a try? On the evidence of what I've seen, I don't believe that the ball is actually grounded. So, what I would have preferred if I was a referee manager is for Jaco to obviously he wanted to go upstairs. It appeared that he wanted to go upstairs, and then Lawrence has come in and said no, it's a try, and he said something like, "Are you sure?" And he's given the try. If you look at it again on replay, and I think Dion from Blommestein actually wanted to come in again and say, "Listen, let's have a look at this. It doesn't look good."
Yeah.
And once again, I think that there's an opportunity for the public to get involved in the game. And whilst I am in favor of referees who are not constantly referring, questionable calls and things that happen on the field to the TMO, I think they do need to take charge. I just think this was a perfect one because Jaco was clearly not in position, and he was relying on someone's view who was about 10 to 12 meters away from this. And if you look at it again, Blades, I can't actually see the ball being grounded. And so then the result would have been based on the question asked. And if the question asked was try yes or no, then you would have had to say, on the evidence of what I've seen, certainly, no try, 5-meter scrum. If he would have asked, give me a reason why I can't award this try, then it's questionable. I mean, for me, it's still, I can't definitively see the ball being grounded, therefore 5-meter scrum. But you could just as easily argue the other way, that it's not clear that Bismarck actually does get his hands under the ball. So
Yeah, right.
I do think that was an opportunity for the match officials, and I think they missed it.
Okay. Let's just handle our tweets for a moment. Ian Humphreys.
Sorry, Blaze, let me just ask, the second part of the question was, how far do I think the Sharks will go?
Yeah, right.
I think they'll win on the weekend. I think they could beat the Crusaders, but I don't think that, and even though they beat the Waratahs in Durban, I don't think that they will beat the Waratahs. I think the Waratahs are going all the way.
The Waratahs are, the one's got to say, the Waratahs are looking really good. Okay, Ian Humphreys. Hello, Ian. Great to have you with us on a Monday morning. His tweet reads as follows, JK. The ref's opinion on Cornell Hendricks' try against the Lions. Did you see the game?
I saw most of it, but there were a flood of tries.
Yeah, well, Cornell Hendricks, a double movement because he pushed with his legs whilst being held. Question mark.
Yes. If that is the case.
I in fact commentated the game, and it was on the tip of my tongue to say there was a case for him to have had a double movement, but Ian, I don't think he was held. He wasn't held in the tackle. He was brought down, but I don't think he was held in the tackle.
Yeah.
It was early on in the game.
Yeah, I did actually watch that game, and I thought the Lions were fantastic, and I've got a general commentary on the Lions season so far and the way they've been building over a couple of years. But just to come back to that, Blade, so we all understand the law. The law is that if momentum takes you to a point and you can reach out over the line and place the ball over the line and score, so therefore then a try will be given, not like the Wales third try, which Walsh gave a couple of weeks ago, where the player rolled the ball over the line. The ref's looking at that. That's not really a top decision. But having said that, it's just basic. If you're not held, then you can attempt to get back onto your feet and lunge over the line, or place the ball, get back on your feet, and then pick it up and carry on. So I hope that makes it clearer.
Yeah. Okay. And your other observations?
Blades, there's a very interesting one. In the 5th minute, 5 minutes and 12 seconds of the game between the Blues and the Chiefs. Did you watch that game?
No.
It
I
was played in
didn't.
incessant, like terrible rain, and the conditions were really poor for rugby. And I thought the teams really made a fist of it, but it was really tough to play constructive rugby. But in the 5th minute of the game, Jerome kind of gets the ball off the back of a scrum, 5 meters from the opposing line, and he goes blindside and rolls out of a tackle of Tawera Kerbalo. And in that rolling out of the tackle, he manages to lunge for the line. And as he's lunging, Kerbalo, who's now on the ground, kicks the ball out of his hands.
As,
That should have been referred by referee Jackson. It was a poor non-referral, and the TMO could and should have been involved because there was enough of a stoppage in play to see clearly that the player has not lost the ball. The ball has been kicked by the tackler from his grasp, in which case it should have been a penalty try. And in a game like that, where points are so hard to come by,
yeah.
The final score was 11-8. And, the Blues scored a very good try eventually by George Mawala, but the Chiefs' winning score, we'll say, was from an intercept, and it was always going to be like that in those type of conditions. But that first score would have changed the whole dynamic of the game. And once again, I questioned the personnel involved, the TMO, and the match officials for not having a look at this again and making for me, what is a clear-cut decision.
Okay, just to clarify the law, if you're on the ground, you cannot partake in play.
The tackler is out. He's lying on the ground, and nobody can kick the ball. Nobody can kick the ball out of even a player on his feet can't kick the ball out of a player's hands who's lunging over the try line. So it's actually not even relevant whether he's lying on the ground or standing up.
Say that again. Even a player on his feet can't kick the ball.
Correct.
Okay. Is
So
that in the law?
Yeah. So that would be a penalty try either way.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying this is just not a good decision at all.
Okay, Gary, our architect friend from Durban says, what about players flying into rucks? Tiaan Liebenberg and Skalkberger both got pinged when it seems to be the norm.
Gary, I totally agree with you. I have a great deal of sympathy for Skalk, and I think the point that he was trying to make to Jaco Peyper was a very fair point. I think it was an overreaction by Peyper and Van Blommensteen, and this type of thing happens all the time. If the action of Liebenberg concentrated on Bismarck's head in the first instance and tried to injure him or hurt him, so obviously then that falls under foul play. But if the truth be told, there are so many cleanouts, exactly like Tiaan Liebenberg did, week in and week out, that if you're going to start nitpicking those, then you've got a whole bunch of other penalties to look for.
Absolutely, yeah.
So once again, I just felt that was a reaction. I spoke earlier about referees getting caught up in discussions and interactions with players. That once again was one of those examples where I just feel like there's too much of it. Player reaction, referee says, okay, I'll have a look, and you get the decision wrong.
Yeah. Another good scrumming game by the Lions.
Blades, I'm glad you said that. I'm not going to change my subject, and I'm not going to change my tack until he becomes a Bok. Julian Riedlinghuis is a machine.
Yeah,
he is a machine. And if you look at his product versus, and I love Connie Oosthuizen, I think he's an unbelievable character of South African rugby. He's probably more of a loose head that's been converted into a tight head, and he's got a great ball carry. I mean, I've said that over and over. I'd never deny someone who's contributed so much to the Springbok cause like Connie has. But if you just look at the product that Riedlinghuis offers, it's special.
Yeah.
It's special.
Now, Jono, the cheaters were pinged. It's pinged. I'm not sure whether pinged is the right word. Were penalised. Connie Oosthuizen on a couple of occasions, and in fact ended up with a yellow card. They seem to both the tight heads and the other guy who came on, Kevin Stevens, seem to have their feet far too far back.
Correct. So Blades, that's what we call hyperextending. So you're not in a position where you're carrying your own body weight. And why the tight heads do that is because they like to get a little bit more power. And so if the feet are right under their bodies, obviously it's more difficult. So it's a fine balance between adhering to the laws of the game, and which is that the front row needs to carry their own body weight on their legs, and setting your feet back so that you can improve your product. Yeah, look, it's I actually want to compliment Maurice van der Westhuizen. Blades, he's gone through the Seventh Circuit and he's got a few Super Rugby games here and there. You're going to be hearing a lot more from this bloke. He is a serious referee.
Yeah.
He's paid his dues. I love his manner. He's very, very polite, and he speaks well to the players, and yet he's not afraid to take action. And those 2 yellow cards that he gave early on in the game, one against the Free State and one against the Cheetahs and one against the Lions, were perfect in the context of the game because they set the game up perfectly. One of my biggest gripes with a lot of the referees is they hide behind warnings and warnings and warnings. And I thought Paper was a classic example. I didn't think Paper had his best game, by the way, but he was warning and warning and warning the Sharks, but clearly it was obvious what they were trying to do. They were trying to eat away at the clock. They were under the pump on defense, and really what it required was a card. And obviously we're talking about 2 different games. The temperature of the one game is far higher than the other game. The other game was a low-key game.
Sure.
But Maurice had the courage of his convictions to give cards early on in the game where he felt players were deliberately cheating. Pulling them all down was a classic example with Philip van der Walt, the 8th man of the Cheetahs.
That's right, Philip van der Walt.
And he gave him a card early on, and then later on he gave a card.
Connie Westhuizen.
No. He gave a card against the Lions for a similar offence.
Yeah.
When Elton Jantjies deliberately didn't release the ball.
He threw the ball away.
Yeah. Well, he was actually holding the ball, so he was shouting at him, "Leave the ball," and he was deliberately not leaving the ball. He was holding the ball so his players could get defensively aligned.
Yeah.
Which is a common tactic, but not often acted on by referees. So here is a rookie referee who understands the game well. I admit it's a low key game. It's not as the quality is not as good as some of the others. But the fact of the matter is that he's had the courage of his convictions to give these cards early on in the game very accurately. And what it's done is it's allowed a spectacle to develop. And I would love to see more referees doing exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Jono, were you the subject of a Afrikaans poster on the newspapers this week?
I don't know.
There was a poster I read on my way to the gym that said, Kaplan, dis hoe dit gebeur het of iets.
I was in the U magazine and Huisgenoot and Playboy, and I was in a few magazines over the last few weeks, and it's really just a follow-on from the road
Naked
show.
or were you dressed?
Yeah. Blades, it's funny because I really didn't think that Playboy would be a great vehicle, but being 47. But I read the article and it was quite well put together.
What was the article about?
No, it was just 20 questions on various stages of my career, and it's what the what Charles, the guy who did the interview, what he found interesting from the book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It wasn't about my exploits off the field, I can assure you.
Tace Brits has said, what about young Thomas du Toit?
Thomas the Tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blades, I think he's a guy for the future. I'm not sure. I think he's got quite a way to go in respect of his scrumming. And I think, he's a tall bloke, and he's got it's going to be more difficult for him as he goes up through the ranks. I thought he struggled a little bit at scrum time, but I think his all-round game more than makes up for it. You must understand, this guy was at school a couple of years ago. I refed him, I think even last year. I stand to be corrected, but I
at
think
school last year.
I'm not joking. I think he
really?
captained. I think he captained Paul Boyce.
Yeah.
I'm almost sure it was last year because one of the last games that I refereed it was Paul Boyce against Paul Jim, and I'm almost sure that he was the captain of Paul Boyce.
Okay. Wow. Wow. So he's
Yeah,
now playing Super Rugby.
yeah, and that's fantastic. If you look at what Jake's done, he's taken this bloke called Tim Sweel,
Yeah.
who also he's a very good ball player. He's quite slight body, but that can always improve. If you look what Keegan Daniels has done, boxing above his weight for so many years, and a guy like Dion Fourie, there is a place in the game for the smaller blokes, Shane Williams, Gareth. So, I mean, there's a lot of classic examples, but he's not afraid to blood these youngsters, which, generally in South Africa, we take a long, long time to transition these players out of school, then under 20s, and then into the open ranks.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Um, then Duncan Betteridge, been busy this morning, Duncan. This weekend, the Sharks have Walsh as the ref, and Brumbies have Yubert. Your take?
Oh, is that a fact?
Well,
I never
yeah,
realized that.
I think that is a fact.
Oh,
That's
okay.
Duncan obviously has seen that those are going to be the referees.
Okay.
And your take?
All right. So Walsh will be reffing the Highlanders and the Sharks. Yeah, I haven't been I think Walsh shows a lot of composure and experience in his games, but I think he's been making quite a few errors and sometimes sort of flouting his nose at some elements of what he should be doing. But I think he's a classy ref, and this playoff game will hold. It'll be fine. He'll do a good job.
Yeah.
Jabez obviously is over there, so they're going to use him for the other game, which is the Brumbies Chiefs. For me, that game will be a lot closer. I know that the Highlanders, I shouldn't underestimate the Highlanders because they have got game and they've got a lot of weapons. They have lost Ben Smith, though, and I'm not sure if he's going to be back for this game.
They've lost Ben?
Is he out?
No, I'm not sure.
Oh, he's been out up until now, so maybe if he comes back, he's a big weapon for them.
Absolutely.
Almost like a talisman for the team. And I've got great respect for Aaron Smith and Molokai Feketau, Aaron Buckman. I mean, there's a lot of players in that team who, they're really good, world-class players. So I don't think the Sharks will underestimate them, and I think they'll win. I do think they'll win. The other game I think will be very close. I think the Chiefs could sneak that one. I would not be at all surprised if the Chiefs won the game against the Brumbies. And really speaking, that game will boil down to how Craig referees the breakdown, and how quickly his patience runs out with repeated infringements.
Yeah.
So I'm putting a marker in the sand here. I'm saying that game will depend on match officiation at the breakdown. However that is officiated will determine how the game progresses, and that will determine which team wins.
Okay, well, that's something that you can watch out for when you watch the Brumbies play. Point of breakdown and how Craig Hubert referees that.
Yeah,
okay, Jono, we're just about out now. Give us your predictions.
So, Blades, I think that the Sharks will win. I don't think they'll win comfortably, but I do think they'll win, especially if they play the right game plan. And I think Jake's probably seen through what happened last time and will play a different game altogether. I'm not discounting the Highlanders and their weapons, but can they come to Durban twice and beat the Sharks? I doubt it. And then secondly, the other semi-final, Brumbies Chiefs. I'm picking the Chiefs to win that one. I think Craig will get on top of the breakdown and will liberate it despite the probably freezing Arctic conditions that are going to be there.
Okay, fine. Right, so you take the Sharks and the Chiefs to win.
Take the Sharks and the Chiefs to win, and then I'll take the Waratahs and and the other game is close. Crusaders Sharks, not 100% sure. I've got my gut feel is that the Sharks will battle to win twice in Christchurch, but they beat them with 14 players last time.
Yeah.
And if they can play with a full complement this time, they do have some big bruises, and I think they'll really test the Crusaders forward pack.
Yeah, although, it would appear that the Crusaders will be back to full strength, and they're always dangerous at home when they're full strength. Amazing performers in Super Rugby have been the Crusaders. I remember I remember some years ago you talked about blooding players. When they brought Dan Carter into that Crusaders side, he played at second 5/8. Now, it's something that we tend to say the scrum half and the fly half are a combination, and then the two centres are a combination, etc., etc. Whereas the New Zealanders have a halfback, and then they have a first 5/8 and a second 5/8, and the combination between the fly half and the inside centre is a very important combination to them.
Yes,
and
you're right.
I think we tend to move away from that situation a little bit. And when Dan Carter burst on the scene, he played at second 5/8 outside of Justin Marshall and Andrew Mertens.
Exactly. And Blades, when the time was right,
he came in.
He came in. He took. Robbie Deans was not scared to drop Mertens in favour of Dan Carter. So somewhere along the line, he saw something special, and he had the courage of his convictions. And I'm a massive fan of Andrew Mertens. I thought Andrew Mertens was a general in his time and won many Test matches, not as many games as Nas won for the Bulls, but I just thought with his absolute generalship on the field, he was magnificent. And Deans had the courage of his convictions. And if you look at what the Crusaders do over and over again, they keep blooding players just bubbling under until eventually the players are ready to take over.
Yeah, or else, my point being that there was a young Dan Carter placed in between three All Blacks. I forget I think it was Robertson played outside of Dan Carter at what they call centre. So you had Justin Marshall, Andrew Mertens, Dan Carter, and Robinson. And there this youngster was learning the trade in between three All Blacks.
Yeah.
And as you say so rightly, when the time was right, boom, in he came, and there was, very little transition time for him to have to go through. He had learned his trade.
Yes, and Blades, if you look at, I forgot the one guy's name, but the Crusaders in the absence, even when Carter went on a sabbatical, but even when he was back, they kept trying players like Tom Taylor.
Yeah.
And there was one other, Tyler Blayendal.
And Tim Lane. No, it wasn't Tim Lane. It was...
No, Tom Taylor.
Tom Taylor played, but they also played I'm sure Lane played at fly half as well.
Okay. So the point really is that they're blooding these youngsters, even when they have All Blacks in their, in their troops. And for me, this is one of the ways of getting. This is one of the elements of their culture, which is better than some of the others. They're happy to include these people, to make these people feel special, to make them feel part of a group. I mean, imagine being an understudy to Dan Carter and then saying, one weekend they say, listen, Dan's going to come off the bench and you're starting. Imagine. I mean, the lift that guy gets is just special.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jono, we've got to wrap it up. Craven Week this week for you guys watching at home, you pensioners watching at home. Craven Week to be watched. That should be quite fun. Go out there and choose your teams and see what schools are producing what. So, JK, thanks, Jono, for being with us this morning, this Monday morning, as always, and have a great week. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Go well.
Balls.co.za